Mr. Rebecca Brizi, if you could introduce yourself and your topic of what we're about to learn today.
What we are talking about is away from words, which I will come to explain in a moment. I work as a management consultant and I work freelance, and I have my background is working in-house with a software company for 12 years, which I joined at a startup phase. We built that up to a going concern, and I was tasked with the things that fall into the role of a management consultant, which are business management decisions and operations. My role was always sort of all-encompassing in that sense. One thing that I did learn was the importance of words, not least because we were a startup, heavily bootstrapped, but we were selling enterprise software and we were competing with really big companies that could take their clients on yachts for fun parties and do all this really spectacular stuff at conferences and had these massive budgets. And we had to compete with that. We had to somehow make our voice heard. And by being very particular about the words that we used, which were completely free, we found a way to do that. And it's always been a bit of an obsession of mine, not least because I grew up in a multilingual home. So language is always one of those things that I enjoy and that entertains me. But today we're at a ProWiN presentation, and we are all working with ProWiN because I take it we all buy into the mission of ProWiN, which is to build businesses through building relationships. And the reason that works is because we come together, we learn together, we socialize together. And what we're doing is getting to know one another. And as we get to know one another, we learn about each other's businesses and we learn to trust one another. We learn our different areas of expertise and how we work. So not only do we have this list of resources for ourselves, but we have resources for our friends and our clients. And the ProWiN model works because when I go to a client or a friend of mine and I say, I want to refer you to somebody I know from ProWiN, what I am doing is directly recommending my fellow ProWiN member to my client or friend. Because I'm making that connection, it is an automatic recommendation, which means an automatic endorsement. A recommendation is always a positive thing. That is a good word. Unless, pause that for a second. If we were in Italy and speaking Italian, and we were recommending one another, we would be using the word raccomandare. So you can hear that the word is the same. It's the exact same etymology, same root, same background, and the meaning is also the same. It means to recommend in Italian. However, there is a cultural context in Italy with a history of a lot of nepotism in the growth of the country in the current republic. So if one person is called raccomandato or recommended, what is actually being said is that that person is not qualified for their job and they are only there because they know the right people. To call somebody raccomandato in Italian is a direct insult. Even though the dictionary definition of the word is the same, the cultural context, the context of using the word, changes the actual meaning of the word. That's an example of how context matters more than the thing that's happening. In language, context matters more than the words that we use. Now, here we go. When we are in a business conversation, that context is a business context, of course. Words that we can use in everyday life that are very positive, happy, good words lose that positivity, become potentially harmful words in a business context. So we're going to go through 3 of those words today and learn how, although we use these words out of habit with a positive spin, when we use them in business, we're actually doing a little bit of damage every single time. The first word we're going to look at is the word help. Now, I want to be clear that I'm not arguing with the act of helping. Helping people is good. The action is a positive one. I'm only looking at how the word gets used in a business context. We hear it very often in pitches, for example, when people present themselves. People will tend to say, I help my clients do X, or I help people in this situation do a certain thing. And I see it a lot on websites. Now you're going to start noticing it too. We help our clients resolve X, Y, Z. The thing is that helping does not actually tell anybody, does not tell your audience what it is that you're doing. And it always makes me think of the example of a plumber. If I have a leak in my home and I call a plumber, I do not want that plumber to help me fix the leak. I don't even know what that would look like. I suppose the plumber could come over and read the instructions while I fix the leak, and maybe every now and then pat me on the back and say, "You're doing great." That is helping me fix the leak, but I do not want the plumber to help me fix the leak. What I want is for the plumber to fix the leak. We should all be like the plumber. Remove the word help and replace it with the action of what we do. Now with the plumber, that becomes obvious, but it's also true in intangible services and in business services. If we take, as an example, our very own Linda Collette, business attorney, does Linda help her clients write legal contracts? I dare say she probably does not. She probably writes the legal contracts for her clients that allow them to achieve particular goals. I would take it one step further and say, does Linda help her clients stay out of court? No, I would argue that Linda does the things that keep her clients out of court. Now, notice the way that I constructed that phrase. I am not saying that Linda can promise that her clients will stay out of court, because that is entirely dependent on their own behavior, and she can't control that. But what she can do is all the things necessary that will keep her clients out of court. And that's a promise that she can make that is very concrete. So the moral of all of this is, when you find yourself using or thinking the word help, don't think about helping your clients. Don't help your clients do a thing, but rather do the thing that helps your clients. Insert the action verb of what it is that you do that makes a difference to your clients. What you're doing is you're bridging a gap of comprehension for your clients to tell them, this is exactly what I do. It's not just that I help you. This is what I do that helps you. So you know what you're getting when you come to work with me. So let that sink in for a second. And I always like at this point to see if anybody wants to play. Does anybody want to try or give a whirl to describing what you do without using the word help? And if you've used the word help until now, even better. Who wants to give it a go? Remember to unmute yourself if you want to play.
I'll try. No one else is. Like, as you were doing this, I was thinking about the client kind of conversation. It's like, I ask the right questions so that my clients can make the right decisions. So that's different than I help them to get clear, right?
Yes.
Like, is that what you mean?
Yeah. So you're asking questions, and then what's the deliverable that you're bringing to them at the end?
That they have clarity on what they know is best for their business, and can also understand why they haven't done that along the way. But now they're, stepping in with clarity and making that decision so things move forward.
Yes. So you are not helping them make decisions. What you're actually doing is clearing the fog and the debris.
Yeah.
So that they are making their own decisions. So what you're actively doing is revealing to them something about themselves, putting steps in place, putting information concretely on paper, really, that with which they can then make decisions. So that's another great example. So I go back to the example I was thinking about with Linda. I want to be very particular that you should never promise the client's outcome, because the client will take an action, especially with, business services, but also personal services. If coaching, and if Anita is selling somebody a bunch of Juice Plus, but they don't take the Juice Plus, it's not going to work. So she can't promise them that they will feel better just by virtue of the fact that she's giving them the tool. But she can promise that the tool, if properly used, will make them feel better. So it is not about promising the client the outcome that's dependent on them, but it is about promising the action and the deliverable that you are doing to make your client's life better. It's really what you're doing is inserting yourself into the value equation that your client is writing out. If I do this and hire this person, then I get this positive outcome. And you want to make sure that it is your action that is doing that. When you don't put the action in there and you just use the word help, then there's that mystery there for your client. And it might not be a conscious mystery. They might not ask themselves the question, but what exactly do you do? But at some level of their consciousness, they are actually asking themselves that question because you haven't actually answered it for them. You haven't told them distinctly what you do. So it's just a few words that actually bring you 3-4 steps closer to a relationship, a commercial relationship with that client. I see a couple things coming through the chat. So I see Linda's in here. I can't run the company or force them to do anything. Exactly. So that's exactly the point we're picking up on now. I advise clients on how to avoid the stress and expensive legal hassles. Yes, already better than using the word help. So advise is something specific, especially in a legal arena, but in a lot of professional services arenas. The word advise, so long as you're using it with the correct thing. So I would give professional advice. Linda would give legal advice. That can work. You could even go further and say, I examine your operations and tell you how you can do the things without ending up in court and sort of build that into a full sentence. So you can replace the word help with a single verb, or you can replace it with an actual clause or sentence that describes what you do. I've got one more in the chat. Let me see. I see Anisha. I transform your knowledge and experience into a book you can leverage in your business or career. Yes, Anisha is almost physically, I mean, I always think of this as Anisha physically taking the story out of the client and turning it into a narrative. Anybody can write, but not anybody can write with a capital W. I mean, that's a separate skill. And so that's what Anisha is bringing to the table. I provide financial solutions and tools so my clients can achieve financial success. Yes, and that's another one where I'd go even a step further and say I build, can you use the word build or something to that effect about the plan for their financial success. There's a level of comprehension of you looking at what they are doing. There's all that sort of action that you can put in there. And again, if you're not sure, think about the deliverable. What is the deliverable that you are giving? I'm a management consultant. My deliverables are highly intangible. And so this is something that I work with for myself all the time. I want to make sure that every time I'm starting a relationship with a client, I can point to a concrete deliverable. So it's very objective. They know what to expect and they know when they've gotten it. And they're not sitting there waiting for an idea or some sort of inspiration, but they're actually going to get something concrete from me. All right, shall we look at the second word? I know there's more going on in the chat, so keep your eye there because there's a lot of fun stuff happening. All right, our second word, which again is another word that denotes very positive things, except in business. And that word is believe. And in this context, also remember believe's first cousin to think. I hear think a lot in interviews, for example, and on news broadcasts when I'm watching telly. People get asked a question and they always answer with, I think, I think, I think. And I've started to notice that it starts to grate on me now. Believe is something that I tend to hear more in a business context, whether we're B2B or B2C, but when we're talking about what we do as a business, I tend to hear people use the word believe a lot. The problem with believe is that belief is personal. It's tantamount to an opinion. It's very subjective, and it is entirely inappropriate for one to impose one's beliefs or opinions on another person. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody and I say, I believe that something about management consulting, and that person says, I believe the opposite, I don't really have anywhere left to go. When I am working with the client, I am the management consultant, and I need to know where my level of expertise is pertinent, and those things are things that I know, not things that I believe. The great example of this correction happened when I was working with an HR consultancy, and the CEO would always talk about, she would say the sentence, we believe that when employees buy into the mission of the business, they will stay longer with that business. So the very first thing we did was just get rid of the words we believe and start the sentence after that. When employees buy into the mission of a business, they will stay longer with that business. Several things happened. The way she spoke to her potential clients, her prospects, changed. The way they heard the message also changed. And the way she thought of her own expertise also changed. She went from pitching potential clients to being a thought leader. And it was just that one change of words, but it actually changed the way she thought of what she was saying and the way she thought of her own expertise. That she could go into a business and say, I'm the expert here. That's why I'm here. I'm the HR consultant. You're running a business. You have a different expertise. And I'm here to tell you that you need to find candidates that buy into your corporate culture and message. She was, as I say, going around doing cold calls and pitches. 12 months, in the 12 months after we worked together, she got 5 speaking engagements, and all of a sudden she was being called into places. Now, there were other changes that she made, but it all started with that removing the word belief and giving her that confidence. But this is true for everyone here. There are certain things that you believe and that you think, and then there are certain things that you just know. I saw Tessa Marie on the call, brilliant photographer. If she has a client who's sitting there saying, I want to be entirely backlit, she's not going to say, well, I think that then that, we won't be able to see your face. No, she's going to say, oi, I'm a photographer and I'm telling you that if you're backlit, we won't be able to see your face. She's the expert. She's in the know. When you find yourself saying the word think or believe, remind yourself that when we're talking about what you do, you are the expert. When we're talking about what you do, you are allowed to bring the knowledge to the table. I'll give you one more example of this with realtors. I've heard realtors use this word at the wrong moments. A common one is, well, I believe that if your house is on the market for 3 months, then you won't get your asking price. The realtor doesn't believe that. The realtor knows that that is a fact. So the realtor doesn't think or believe that a house needs to sell within 3 months to get a good price. The realtor knows that because of all their years of experience, because of the data that they have access to, because they are the experts in real estate and in getting houses sold. So let me pause that again for another moment. Does anybody use the word think or believe in your everyday language?
So the way I've always thought of it is that I've tried to take a lot of that language out because it's qualifying language. It makes it more palatable to people to say something like, I think this might be. So I tried to take that out, but yeah, I still do it.
Yeah, but you raise a good point. And I have had this said to me actually with their design agency. And the owner of the design agency where we're talking, and he was saying, it's a bit of a confidence thing even. He said, I find myself in front of somebody and then I feel like if I am about to say you're wrong or, correct them or, tell them their current logo is no good. And so I say, I think, or I believe to sort of soften it and use it in that way. One simple trick is if it is a conversation of that sort, which I know isn't exactly what you're saying, Neelam, but to soften it if it feels a bit strong, when you are in a conversation, you can just flip it around and say, don't you think that? And that's an easy way to get around the whole, I'm about to correct you thing. But again, have confidence in your expertise. And if you're sitting there knowing that my expertise is going to serve you well here, then use that. And you can soften it by turning it into a question. And that's true in every context. Whenever you're going to say something difficult, turn it into a question, everything becomes easier. The easiest way to say no to somebody is to ask them about it. But it's the same root, the same sort of underlying problem that Neelam's talking about, which is, we want to come in softly to people. And you're absolutely right. We don't want to come in aggressively and say things in a way that isn't in any way intimidating. But that's why it's not about never having opinions or beliefs or never recognizing that somebody else might have a different point of view. It's really just about knowing, when am I about to make a difference to you? When am I about to tell you something that is really the underlying reason of why you're hiring me? It's because I have this knowledge. And if you trust me as your service provider, it's then trust this knowledge. We wouldn't be in here if you didn't trust me with this knowledge. So know when you are in your area of expertise, and be the person in the know. And I see that Anita put a comment in that she sees believe a lot with author clients in the first draft and removes it every time. I love it. Yes, there's something also that we think Again, it's like help, it's a positive thing. And so it's a word that we want to use, but there's the correct context in which to use it. The phrase I recommend is absolutely fine. Absolutely. We are all here to recommend. This sort of goes back to what we were saying before, with Linda as an example in particular. We can't make our clients do anything specific. We can only essentially make recommendations, give them the tools, point them in the direction, draw the roadmap. But ultimately, they're the ones who are doing the things. So by all means, we have to promise only what we really can promise. All right, getting a few more comments in the chat. In coaching, this applies to all of our expert advisors, that when we step into leading the client energy, we wouldn't use those words. That's a really interesting point. Yes, understanding that relationship. And again, it's just about the impact of words. What is it that you want your clients to think, but also to do as a reaction of talking to you and working with you? And small changes in words can make a big difference in what they do actually think and do. So let's jump in. Yes, please.
What I also use often is, in my experience, or the most common mistakes I see, or yes, you're not alone in that, the way you're approaching this.
Yes.
I see this pretty consistently with people who have been out of the workplace for a period of time, or using other examples instead of saying I think or believe.
Yeah, that's an excellent example. Really good point, Joyce, that you can also make it easier for somebody when you remind them that the way I like to think about this is, you're very ordinary, you're not extraordinary. A lot of people struggle with this, or in this situation, or, what you're going through is what you should expect to go through, or that confusion is what you should expect to have. So absolutely, you can say, well, in my experience is a great one, because again, you're reinforcing that you have that experience, that you've seen this before. But it also does soften that position for the person you're speaking with, for your client, to know that if they are in a moment of struggle, that's normal and it's part of the process. So that's a very good example too. Thank you. All right. So our third word, once again, is a very positive word that I see used all the time. And the word is quality. People love to define their work or what they do as quality or high quality. But every time I hear the word, my first reaction is to ask, what's the alternative? I have to assume that you think that what you do is high quality, or you wouldn't be out here selling it. That just speaks to basic integrity. So I'm going to assume that you think it is quality. And I'm not entirely sure why you feel the need to point it out to me. I'm sure we've all been in the situation where somebody says, I'm very intelligent, or I'm very elegant, or something positive about themselves. And just by virtue of the fact that they have to tell you, you start to think it might not be true. Quality, if somebody uses the word, it's not that I automatically think that they are not quality, but it does tell me that they haven't necessarily defined what that means. So don't highlight something that your audience, your clients, your connections should be able to take for granted. Assume that what you're doing is quality. So that's the first thing with quality, is that, yes, but from the moment you walk in the room, let us take for granted that what you're doing is high quality. The other thing about it is that, and that's true with a lot of these words and a lot of adjectives in general, it doesn't say anything specific about you and about how you work. Quality, to describe what you do as quality, highlights what you do, but it doesn't insert you into the equation. So what you're doing is reminding me of also all the other people I know who do what you do. You are in effect advertising the competition. So if Leslie walks into a room and says, I provide quality financial planning, I'm going to think, oh, yep, I know what that is. And I've just reminded of the other people I know who provide financial planning, and I have no idea how what Leslie does is different from what everybody else does. So what's the trick here? Take the word quality and describe what that means for you. Give it 3 descriptors. There's no one unique way of doing things that will make it unique to you in the world, but there will be a combination of traits or approaches or process that does make this unique to you. So take the word quality and say, okay, if I had to define quality in a way that is highly objective, that I can make a promise on this, what does that mean? What does quality mean to me? Is it a certain level of responsiveness, a level of detail? Is it a way of interacting with clients? Is it the way in which you can promise a bespoke service, what you do to make something truly bespoke? Define quality and use that to describe what you do. So now if Leslie walks into the room and says, I provide financial planning with these 3 core tenets, that is something I will now associate directly with Leslie. And I also am picturing exactly how she works. I've got something to go on. So again, with quality, make an objective promise. And as I say, this is true with adjectives in general. Some of the adjectives are objective. If I have a green website and it's green, it's just green. But when you're using especially qualitative adjectives, think about what that actually means, and can you be more specific? Can you make an objective promise with what you're saying? When you're looking at the words that you use in general, what you want to focus on is not necessarily convincing people that you are the best at what you do, but instead convince them that you are the most valuable person to them. This is not about being perfect. This is about providing value. And to do that, you have to know 2 things. You have to know your audience and know what it is that they value. And you have to know the impact that you have. In other words, how you provide that value. And when you talk to your clients or to an audience or in your marketing collateral, when you introduce yourselves, don't use words that anybody else in the room could be using that will make you sound the same as somebody else. But actually, be specific about what you do and what your client gets out of it. Describe your service and describe how you bring value specifically. And what you're doing is describing to your future clients what the experience will be like working with you. So again, when we are vague about what we do, or when we use terms that are a bit too generic, we're creating this distance that then has to be bridged. That's why we call them away from words, because we are actually removing ourselves further away from the impact we have on our clients. So bridge the gap automatically, use a language that is automatically impactful and also that is specific to you and makes you stand out and says something about your services right away. And that takes me to the end. And I will say one more thing. If you are using any of this language or you want to review your elevator pitch, for anybody on the call, I really enjoy this stuff. And just as a perk, I'll be glad to look at that for you. You can send me an email, and which is rebecca@rgbrizi.com. You're seeing my URL there with your, say, 2 to 3 line pitch. And if you want me to just share my thoughts on it or give you any comments, I'll be glad to do that. So do feel free. And let me come back to you now. There we go. All right. Thank you. Does anybody, before we look at Q&A, does anybody want to play with the word quality or other adjectives of that sort? Best, premier, number 1.
Well, hey, Rebecca, will you indulge me and play? Let's play with ProWiN, because we call ourselves the premier Atlanta, yes. Right? The premier women's networking group in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. But we probably should be more specific now that you say that. So let's play with that. I mean, what are we providing? We have our mission statement, right? Mm-hmm. Building business by building relationships.
Yeah, that's strong. I will say, I believe ProWiN is the premier in terms of it is the largest and most active professional women's networking group in Atlanta. So, yes, obviously.
Yes, okay.
But right, what does premier mean beyond that? So that's a fair definition. What does premier mean? What does it mean in terms of quality? Because I think there is a quality association with the word premier. So what does that mean to other ProWiN members?
Rebecca, I would like to ask you, from a transformational standpoint, and I have a strategic business for marketing and communications, and I also have a business that is about transformation and personal development. And, I do use the word transformation in certain settings where people can actually understand what that means, but I think the word transformation in many ways, it does help understand that there's going to be something that happens, like there's a beginning and a place where you're going. But at the same time, it can be overused, and it can be like, I do transformation, the transformation, you do transformation, everybody does transformation, and then everybody kind of ends up looking the same. So in those kind of environments, what are your suggestions?
I will say you're right, that transformation does describe something. Right away I know, okay, I'm going to be different coming out of this process than I was going in. So it's a descriptive word, and I'm big on things that give me a concrete understanding of what is about to happen to me, what I should expect from this experience. So the word itself does do that. Beyond that, there's the what is, if you want to think about how do you describe this, and even more descriptively, shall we say, that paints more of a picture, then what is the process? And what is, again, I'll go back to what is the deliverable, or what is the description of the transformation? So taking that word and actually making that the focal point. What I will say, and there's also the fact that there is, and I think I touched on this already, that there's no real endpoint. Every way that you use to describe your business can always be improved. And context matters too. There was something in the chat too about things like different cultures, ages, speaking to different people of different backgrounds. All of that matters, right? We started by saying context always matters more than the thing. So you might have multiple descriptions of your business, and you might adapt that to the specific audience or circumstance in which you're speaking. The way to continuously improve, or one way to continuously improve, is to do exactly what you are saying right now, Virginia, which is always question your words. And so use a word that, even if it does work for you, can you ask yourself, yeah, but what does this mean really? What does this describe really? And can you always dig a little bit deeper, become a little bit more specific in the words that you're using? The more specific, the better, frankly. And there's always space to be more descriptive and more specific. But again, it's just because it removes the mystery for the person you're speaking to. The more mystery, the harder it is to understand, and the less they're going to connect to the message. So it's really always about removing that mystery. So always ask yourself, what does the word actually mean? If I have 5 people in a room and I ask all 5 to define this word, how many definitions am I getting? Am I getting 1? Am I getting 3? Am I getting 6? So, the more confident you are that you're getting the same definition, then the more specific the word actually is.
Yeah, I think specifics really matter when you describe what you do. I know I used to talk about myself a lot as a family law lawyer. And like, people would often be like, well, are you saving my family? Are you, will you do my will? Will you do, and so I realized I had to be more specific, and I had to talk about the fact that I'm a divorce lawyer. I represent people in their divorce cases. And that helped people understand. Now, then, it stops some conversations anyway, but because, not everyone wants to talk about that, but I'm just saying, specifics really matter, because sometimes people don't understand, even though you understand what you're saying about what you do, they need more specifics so they can kind of picture what you really do, what service you can offer them. And I just think that there's so much to that, Rebecca. It's such a help to think about it that way.
Well, and I think a lot of people, what happens is we all get into the jargon of whatever industry we're in, and we use it as if everybody knows what it means. To Anita's point in the chat, so many coaches talking about being heart-centered. What does that mean? Well, to coaches, we're like, oh, everyone else is like, huh? And I think that's, I found that true of you, Erin, about that family law. She was my divorce lawyer, so I didn't understand that that's what family law was until I met you and we talked about it. So it's great that you're being more specific.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I realized finally, because people were like, what is that? What do you do?
And Joyce makes a good point in the chat that nobody can refer business to you unless they have a very good understanding of what you do. When a fellow ProWiN member is going to recommend you to a client or a friend, they're going to be using their own language. And so they need to be able to understand what you do and the value that you bring from their own context, because they're not going to just memorize the sentences that you give and then deliver them out. So absolutely, it's the key to referrals as well, as being able to connect with people in their own context.
Thank you, everybody.
I would add on with what Rebecca, I'd add on with what Joyce just said, especially with a lot of us that have been coaches or in some kind of coaching field. That is such a broad term and such a broad field. You really have to say, what do you do? You know, what type of coaching do you do? So I think there are certain professions I was just going to point out that this is extremely important.